You know, it's one of the most common and definitely one of the most stressful emergencies a property owner can face. One minute, everything's totally fine, and the next, you're looking at water everywhere. So today we're going to break down exactly what happens when water damage strikes, and more importantly, what you really need to do about it.
So let me ask you this. What do you think is the biggest hidden threat to your home? It's probably not what you think. It's not fire, it's not wind, it's water. And it often comes from places you'd least expect.
First up, let's talk about burst pipes. That tiny little quarter-inch supply line. You know, the one that feeds your sink or toilet? Well, that little thing can unleash over 650 gallons of water an hour. To put that in perspective, that's enough to fill a hot tub in less than an hour. It's wild. Then you've got your air conditioner. In a humid place, that AC unit can churn out 10 to 20 gallons of condensation every single day. Now, if that drain line gets clogged, all that water has to go somewhere, and you guessed it, it's usually straight into your ceiling or your walls. And for those of us in coastal areas, you have to worry about storm surge. But here's the kicker. This isn't just any water, it's salt water. And that difference is absolutely critical, because salt water is incredibly corrosive. It just chews through electrical systems and building materials way faster than fresh water ever could.
And finally, the one nobody wants to even think about: sewage backups. This isn't just a gross mess, folks. It's a legitimate health hazard. It's classified as Category 3 black water, and it's full of pathogens that demand a professional response. No question.
But listen, the source of the water is really only half the battle. The other half of the story? It's your environment. Let's use Clearwater, Florida as a case study here, just to see how your location can create the absolute perfect storm for water damage.
So take a look at Clearwater's climate. You've got an average humidity of 75% plus over 50 inches of rain every year. What that means is you have an environment where once moisture gets inside, it just does not want to leave. And that constant dampness, it's like rolling out the red carpet for mold growth.
And this brings us to maybe the single most critical concept in all of water damage. It's a ticking clock. Seriously, those first 2 days after water intrusion, they mean everything.
All right, burn this number into your brain. 24 to 48 hours. That's not a guideline, that's a biological deadline. After that window, mold spores, which by the way are always floating around in the air, find a nice wet food source in your drywall or your wood, and they start to colonize. At that point, the problem just got way more complex and a lot more expensive.
Let's just watch how fast this gets out of hand. Within just 1 hour, water has already wicked deep into your drywall, your subfloors, your insulation. By day 1, that drywall is starting to swell up and break down, and wood floors begin to warp. By day 2, like we just said, mold sets up shop. And after a week, forget it. You're not talking about cleanup anymore, you're talking about major reconstruction, because the actual structural integrity of your home could be at risk.
Okay, that all sounds pretty scary, right? But here's the good news. There is a proven, scientific method to handle all this. Let's take a look at the professional playbook for turning this chaos into a controlled, methodical process.
The whole process is actually really logical. First, they inspect to find the source and then extract every last drop of standing water. Next, and this is the part that really matters, is structural drying. They use these powerful air movers and dehumidifiers to literally pull the hidden moisture out of the materials themselves. Only after everything is verifiably bone dry does the final restoration and rebuild even begin.
And that brings up a really important distinction you'll hear pros talk about: mitigation versus restoration. Think of it like this. Mitigation is the emergency first aid. It's about stopping the bleeding, getting the water out, stabilizing everything. Restoration is the surgery that happens afterward, the rebuilding that gets your property back to how it was. You absolutely cannot have a successful restoration without proper mitigation first.
So how do the pros make sure they get it right? Well, it's not guesswork, it's all science. Let's demystify some of the professional standards and terms so you can actually know what a proper job looks like. It all comes down to a standard called the IICRC-S500. Now, the IICRC is basically the organization that writes the official rulebook for water damage. So a technician who's certified isn't just winging it. They're following a specific set of scientifically proven protocols for how to measure moisture, classify the contamination, and dry a structure the right way.
And a huge part of that science is knowing what you're dealing with. A burst supply line, that's Category 1, or clean water. But say a washing machine overflow, that's Category 2, gray water, which has contaminants. And then you have the really nasty stuff, sewage or floodwater. That's Category 3, black water. And it's a severe health risk that requires a much more aggressive protocol.
So why does all this science and following the rules matter so much? Well, at the end of the day, it hits you right in the wallet. It's this aggressive, by-the-book approach that prevents secondary damage. It's what keeps a $3,000 cleanup from ballooning into a $15,000 remediation nightmare. Okay, we have covered a ton of ground. So let's boil this all down to the absolute essential takeaways that every single property owner needs to understand before they ever have to face a water emergency. Look, I know it's tempting to grab a shop vac and some fans and think, I can handle this. But trying to DIY this is incredibly risky. You just can't remove the moisture that's trapped deep inside walls and under floors. And that always leads to hidden mold and rot. Plus, you won't have the scientific documentation your insurance company needs to approve the claim. And believe it or not, you could even void your policy for future damage.
And this right here is why professional drawing is so critical, and why it's a process that just can't be rushed. This isn't about what feels dry to the touch. It's a scientific process that takes days. Wood framing might dry in 3 days, sure, but dense stuff like concrete, you could be looking at a week, maybe more. Rushing this step is the single biggest mistake you can possibly make. So we'll end on this. A pipe bursts in your home, right now. That 48-hour countdown has officially begun. Knowing everything we've just covered, what's your plan? Having an answer to that question before it happens, well, that's the best insurance you can have.